ChatGPT said. The sun was low in the sky, painting the fields orange and gold. The wind blew soft dust across the old wooden porch of a small human farm. Inside, John sat at his small table, eating a simple dinner of bread and soup. It had been a long day in the fields, and he was tired. Life on this distant planet was quiet, lonely, and cold, but it was peaceful. That's how he liked it. Then came the knock, soft, hesitant, like someone unsure they were even allowed to knock. John looked up. No one ever visited him. Not out here. He stood, walked to the door, and opened it slowly. There she was. An alien woman stood in the dying light, her body thin and trembling. She was holding the hand of a small child, and another little one clung to her back, barely awake. Their skin was a pale blue, their eyes large and tired. Dust covered their clothes. The woman's face was dirty, but her eyes were full of something deep. Desperation. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She only said one thing. "My children are hungry." John's chest tightened. He looked at the children. Their legs were shaking. Their eyes looked like they hadn't seen a meal in days. The little one on her back whimpered, too weak to even speak. The woman bowed her head. "I will work your fields," she said softly. "I will clean your house. I will warm your bed. Just please feed them." John didn't know what to say. He wasn't a rich man. He lived alone. He had no servants, no luxuries. Just a house, a few machines, and a small crop that barely survived the harsh planet winds. But he had food, and he had warmth. He stepped aside and opened the door wider. "Come in." The woman looked up, her eyes wide with shock. She hesitated. "Come in before they freeze," he said again, firmer this time. She slowly entered, her children following like shadows. John pointed to the small couch near the heater. The children curled up there without a word. Their small hands gripped each other tightly. John went to the kitchen. He poured warm soup into bowls, added slices of old bread, and brought them over. The children didn't wait. They began eating fast, like they were afraid the food would vanish. The woman tried to eat slower, but her hands shook. "What's your name?" John asked quietly. "Laura," she said. "My children are Vec and Nori." "You came far?" She nodded. "I walked for 2 days. No one else would open their door." John felt something break inside. What kind of world lets a mother beg for her children's lives? That night, he gave them his bed. He slept on the floor by the fire. In the darkness, he heard soft whispers. "Will he sell us?" one of the children asked. "No," Laura whispered. "He is different." John closed his eyes. He didn't want thanks. He didn't want anything. But he couldn't forget the look in her eyes at the door. A look of someone who had already lost everything and was ready to give away what little remained. The next morning, the sun rose over dry fields. John found Laura already outside, trying to work the soil with her bare hands. She was too weak. She fell once, twice, but she kept going. "You don't have to do this," John said, walking over. "I do," she said, standing up slowly. "I said I would. You need to rest. The kids need you strong." "I'm not used to resting," she said with a tired smile. "But thank you for last night." He nodded and handed her a coat. It was old but warm. Inside the house, the children laughed for the first time. They played with a wooden toy John had carved long ago, back when he still had hope. He watched them and wondered, what had happened to this woman? Why did she think offering her body was the only way to save her children? And why did no one else open their door? He didn't know the answers, but he knew one thing. No one else knocked, and he had opened the door. Bread, blankets, and broken pride. The morning air was sharp and cold, but Laura didn't care. Her children had full bellies for the first time in days. She woke before the sun, her body aching but her heart steady. Without waiting, she stepped outside to start working. She didn't ask. She didn't knock. She simply saw soil and began to dig. Her hands were bare, her fingers stiff, but she kept going. The dirt was hard. The wind bit at her arms. She slipped once and hit her knee. Blood rose. Still, she got back up. John stood silently at the window, watching. He didn't understand her yet. He had given her food and warmth. That should have been enough for now. But something about this woman wouldn't let her rest. She had made a promise to work for her children's survival, and she intended to keep it. He walked outside and handed her gloves. "You don't need to do this today," he said. Laura looked at him, her hands shaking. "If I rest, I feel useless. I must earn what you gave us." John didn't reply. He simply bent down and worked beside her. By noon, she couldn't stand straight. Her body gave out and she collapsed onto the dry ground. John picked her up, arms gentle, and brought her inside. "You're not a slave," he said quietly. "I know," she replied, her voice cracking, "but I've been treated like one for so long. I forgot what it feels like to just be." He gave her soup again and sat across from her. The children were sleeping, full and warm beneath thick blankets. Their faces, once tight with hunger, now looked calm. John finally asked, "Where's their father?" Laura looked down. A long pause passed. "He died. In the mines. The tunnels collapsed, and the company left him behind. They said only the rich deserved rescue." John's jaw clenched. He had heard of such things. On this harsh colony planet, justice came with a price tag, and the poor could never afford it. "So you ran?" "They took our home. Our rations. I sold everything, even my hair, but it wasn't enough. So I walked, and every door was shut?" She nodded slowly. "Until yours." John sighed. He leaned back in the old chair, staring at the low fire. Later that night, as the wind howled, outside, Laura found a quiet moment to wash herself. She used a cloth dipped in warm water. As she scrubbed the dust from her arms and face, she stared at her reflection in the broken glass above the wash basin. Her skin was no longer hidden under dirt. Her eyes looked brighter. But the pain, it stayed. She wrapped herself in a blanket and returned to the small room where John had laid out cushions near the fireplace. He was still awake, adding wood to the flames. "You gave us food. You gave us heat," she whispered. "I have nothing to give you in return." "You gave me company," John replied without looking at her. "That's more than I've had in years." Laura blinked, surprised. "You live here alone?" He nodded. "By choice. Until now, maybe." Silence passed between them, warm and heavy. In the corner, her son Vex stirred. He sat up suddenly, gasping. "Where's Mama?" he whispered. "I'm here," she said softly, rushing to him. He clutched her, his tiny arms shaking. "I dreamed. Someone took you away again." "No one will take me, love," she said. "Not now, not here." John stood and placed another blanket over the boy. "They'll be safe as long as they're with me," he said simply. Laura looked at him. For the first time, she believed it. But outside, hidden in the dark hills, 3 pairs of eyes watched the little house with growing interest. Someone had noticed her again. And this time they weren't going to knock. Secrets under the soil. The next morning the sky was cloudy and the wind felt heavier, like something was coming. But inside the little farmhouse the world was calm. Warm smells filled the air as John made breakfast. Laura folded the blankets and helped tidy the small room. The children laughed softly while eating fruit and warm bread, their cheeks no longer hollow. John smiled quietly. It had been years since this house had seen laughter. After breakfast, he handed Laura a small spade. "Come," he said. "I'll show you my garden." They walked behind the house where rows of half-dead plants struggled to grow in the poor alien soil. John knelt and began turning the dirt. Laura joined him, copying his movements, but then she paused. Her fingers brushed the earth gently as if listening to it. "These plants are dry, but the root veins are still alive," she said, surprising John. You know farming? He asked. She nodded. Not farming. Healing. I was a root mender on my homeworld. I helped grow healing herbs for many years. John looked at her with new eyes. You were a healer? I was. Before the war. Before the hunger. Before everything was taken from me. As she spoke, she pulled a strange seed from her pouch and planted it in the corner. This may grow here, she whispered. It feeds on bitter soil. John asked, why didn't you say this before? She smiled sadly. People don't want to hear what the hungry have to say. They think the poor have no wisdom. Suddenly, a sound broke the peace. A soft crunch of gravel. Laura froze. Her eyes darted toward the ridge beyond the field. John turned. What is it? She didn't answer. Her face had gone pale. She stood quickly, grabbing her children and pulling them close. There's someone watching, she whispered. I know that feeling. John scanned the hillside but saw no one. Still, something felt wrong. Who would follow you all the way? Here? He asked. Laura's lips tightened. Not everyone was done with me when I ran. There are men who collect debts. Even when the debt is your life, John felt a cold weight settle in his chest. That night, John checked the locks on every door and window. He gave Laura a small knife and told her to keep it hidden. She didn't argue. As the children slept, Laura sat by the fire, staring into the flames. John sat beside her. You said you were a healer. What else? She hesitated. Then, softly, I was married to a miner. He was kind. He worked long hours. One day the mine collapsed. He saved 7 lives, but not his own. After his death, the company said he was replaceable. They took our home as payment for his tools. John's hands clenched. Laura continued, her voice hollow. After that I begged, I sold everything. When there was nothing left, I started walking. You passed how many farms before mine? 17. John exhaled, heavy and angry. 17 families turned you away? Laura nodded. Some cursed me. One threw stones. A few laughed. John shook his head. That's not right. No, she said quietly. But I stopped hoping someone would care. Until you. John didn't reply. The fire popped. Then, Laura said something strange. I thought humans were like us, selfish, cold. But you opened your door. John stared into the flames. Maybe I opened it because I knew what it feels like when no one knocks. A long silence settled between them. But outside, beyond the warmth of the house, shadows moved. 3 figures stepped silently through the trees, eyes glowing faintly. In the dark. One of them held a chain. Another carried a long stick that crackled with energy. The third whispered, She's here. I told you she ran to a human's land. They moved closer, quiet as night. Inside, Laura suddenly stood up. Her body tensed. John looked at her. What is it? She didn't answer, but her eyes were full of fear. The threat returns. The wind howled that night like it remembered old pain. The stars above the farmhouse blinked behind thick clouds, and the land fell into uneasy silence. Inside, the fire crackled softly while Laura rocked little Nori to sleep. John checked the doors again, but his chest felt tight. Something wasn't right. Then, 3 hard knocks. Not soft, not like Laura's. These were loud, sharp, and full of purpose. John froze. Laura clutched her child tighter. Vec woke up, eyes wide with fear. Don't answer, Laura whispered. John moved to the door slowly and looked through the small side window. 3 aliens stood outside. Not like Laura. These ones were tall, armored, and carried weapons that hummed in the dark. One of them had scars across his face. Another was dragging something behind him. It looked like a metal collar. Laura gasped. It's them. They followed me. The door rattled under another knock. Then a voice deep and cold. "Bring her out, human. She belongs to us. You're hiding stolen property." John stepped back, furious. "She's not property." The scarred one laughed from outside. "That's not what the contract says." Laura shook her head. "They forced me to sign it. When my husband died, they offered food. I didn't know they would take everything, including my children." John's eyes burned. "They want the kids too? They said my children could work off the debt. They call them future assets." John grabbed his old rifle from the wall. It was dusty, but it still worked. "I'm not letting them take you," he said. "You don't have to fight for me." Laura whispered. John looked her in the eyes. "You knocked on my door. That means you're mine to protect." The front door shook again, this time with force. Then came the voice again. "Last warning. Open this door or we take it down." John aimed the rifle. "I guess they'll have to try." A loud crash came as the front door exploded inward. The men stormed in with glowing rods. The room filled, with smoke and shouting. John fired once. One of the invaders fell, but then one grabbed Laura, pulling her by the arm. She screamed as her children cried out. Vec tried to bite the man's hand. The alien struck him. John tackled the attacker to the ground, wrestling the rod away and slamming his fist into the alien's face. Blood sprayed. Laura grabbed the metal poker from the fireplace and swung with all her strength at the third man's leg. He howled and fell. For a moment, silence. Then, breathing heavy, John stood. All three attackers were down. One moaned softly. The others didn't move. The children clung to their mother, shaking. John leaned on the table, blood dripping from his lip. "You're safe now," he said, voice rough. Laura sobbed, holding her children tightly. Why did you do this? You could have let them take us." John looked at the broken door. "I've let too many people go in my life," he said quietly. "Not this time." Outside, the wind finally calmed, but they all knew something had changed. This was no longer just a safe place to hide. Now, it was a battlefield. What it means to be safe. The broken door hung off its hinges. Blood stained the floor where the fight had happened. The invaders were gone, dragged far away by John at sunrise and left at the edge of the forest with their weapons thrown into the river. He didn't say what he'd whispered to them before. They crawled off, but whatever it was, they didn't come back. Inside, Laura cleaned the floor in silence. Her hands moved slowly, not because she was tired, but because her thoughts were heavy. Vec sat near the window, holding a blanket and staring out. Nori clung to her side, afraid to let go. John brought warm tea, placed it on the table and sat down across from her. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Laura finally said, "You didn't have to fight for me." John took a sip. "I know." "Why did you?" John looked at the children. "Because someone should have done it a long time ago." Laura's lips trembled. "I was prepared to give up everything. My body, my pride, anything. If it meant food for my children. But you gave without asking. You fought without wanting reward." She looked at her hands. "I forgot what safety feels like. Even now, I still expect someone to knock and take it all away again." John stood and walked to an old box in the corner of the room. He opened it and pulled out a dusty wooden frame. Inside was a faded photo of a woman and a small human child. "My wife and daughter," he said softly. "Lost them in the colony plague 5 years ago." Laura stared at the photo. The woman had kind eyes. The child's smile was wide and bright. "They were everything," John continued. "After that, I locked my door. I didn't want to feel that pain again." "But you opened it for me," Laura whispered. "I didn't do it for you," John replied. "I did it for them. Because if they were here, they'd tell me to help. You." Laura reached across the table and touched his hand. "They'd be proud of you." John didn't answer, but his eyes said enough. Later that day, Lura helped rebuild the door. Vec carried small nails while Nori played with a stick, pretending it was a sword. For the first time in a long time, laughter returned. Light, soft, unsure, but real. John noticed Lura walking without fear. Her back stood straighter. Her eyes no longer looked to the ground. In the evening, they all sat near the fire, warm and quiet. Vec curled up beside John. "Are you going to leave us too?" he asked in a small voice. John shook his head. "No, kid. I'm right here." "But we're not your family," the boy said. John looked at him carefully. "Not by blood, but family isn't always about blood." Lura listened quietly, tears building in her eyes. Outside, the stars returned to the sky. The house stood strong, a light in the dark. But deep in the woods beyond the field, whispers stirred. Word was spreading. A human farmer had stood against slavers. He'd defended a worthless mother and her children like they were treasure. And in a cruel galaxy, that kind of kindness was dangerous. Something bigger was coming. But for now, the children were safe. And for the first time, so was she. The council comes knocking. 3 days passed. The wounds faded, but peace did not return. The farm was quiet but not calm. Lura kept glancing toward the hills when she thought no one was watching. John reinforced the door, set traps by the fences, and stayed awake longer at night. The children laughed more, but their laughter never reached full joy. It was guarded like they were waiting for it to be stolen again. Then, near sunset, a loud humming sound filled the sky. A sleek black skimmer from the colony capital hovered over the fields. Its silver wings shone like blades. John stepped out with his rifle slung across his back. Lura stood behind him, clutching Nori's hand. The ship landed. Out stepped 2 alien officials in crisp robes, symbols of the colony's council shining on their chests. Behind them stood armed guards, silent and cold. One of the robed aliens spoke, his voice smooth and empty. "Human, you are sheltering a fugitive." John's eyes narrowed. "I'm sheltering a mother and her kids." "She is under contract," the other official added. "She is marked as abandoned property." "She's a person," John snapped. "Not a broken machine." The guards shifted, but the officials raised a hand. "We are not here for violence," the smooth-voiced alien said. "Only to restore order, return the woman and her offspring, and this ends without harm." Lura stepped forward, trembling. "I signed nothing freely. I was starving. They gave me spoiled food and claimed I owed them for it. My husband was dead. My children were sick." "Still, a contract is a contract," the council agent said coldly. John stepped between them. "Then your system is broken." The official tilted his head. "You speak boldly for a farmer." John looked him in the eyes. "You speak coldly for someone with a beating heart." The moment grew tense. Then a voice rang out from the hill. It was old woman Mira, the herb seller who lived 2 farms down. She stepped forward with her walking stick. "She's not property," Mira said. "She's been working these fields. She's been healing plants. And her kids have brought more life here than we've seen in seasons." Another voice joined, Tomar, the mechanic. "If this is what your law protects, then maybe your law is the problem." Soon more neighbors came, quiet but firm, forming a half-circle behind John. Farmers, mechanics, cleaners, simple people. But together, they stood tall. The officials hesitated. "You are risking council punishment," one said. John raised his chin. "Then punish me." Lura stared at him, stunned. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. John looked back at her. "Yes, I do." The officials conferred in hushed tones. The guard stayed still but unsure. There was no order to attack, and now too many eyes watching. Finally, the lead official turned. "This isn't over." They returned to their ship. The engines flared. Then they lifted into the sky and disappeared, into the clouds. Silence fell over the farm. Then someone clapped, and another. Soon, the entire small crowd was cheering softly, not loudly, but with relief. It wasn't just about Lura, it was about the choice to stand together. Later, in the quiet of the evening, Lura stood with John by the repaired fence. "You risked your life," she said softly, "for me, for us." John looked at her, tired but calm. "No, I risked it for what's right." Lura stepped closer, voice trembling. "I never knew a place like this could exist. A place where people choose love over fear." He didn't speak, but in that silence she knew she was no longer just surviving. She was beginning to live. A new home is born. The days after the council's visit passed like slow rain, soft but full of weight. The land still bore the scars of conflict, but the air felt different now. The fear that once clung to Lura like a second skin had begun to loosen. She no longer jumped at every sound. The children laughed freely now, running through the rows of crops like wind spirits. And John? He smiled more. He taught Vec how to fix an old irrigation pipe, showed Nori how to plant seeds, and every evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, Lura sat beside him on the porch, their silence warm, not lonely. But change comes slowly, and not without shadow. One morning, a courier drone dropped a message on the doorstep, an official scroll from the colony's capital. It was cold, precise, and cruel. "The woman and her children are no longer claimed by the council," it said. "However, any citizen who offers refuge without legal adoption is in violation." Lura held the scroll with shaking fingers. "They want you to send us away," she whispered, "to keep your land, your name, your life." John stared at the message. Then slowly, he tore it in half and threw the pieces into the fire. "I'm done living under threats," he said. "And I'm not sending away the only good thing to happen to me in years." Lura blinked fast. "But we're not your blood, we're not your past." John reached into a drawer and pulled out a folded paper. It was old, an official Earth adoption request form, half complete and unsigned. The name of his lost daughter had once filled that line. He took a pen and quietly scratched it out. Then with slow, steady hands he wrote 3 new names: Lura, Vec, Nori. He looked at her. "I can't bring back what I lost, but maybe I can build something new." Lura covered her mouth, her eyes flooding. She fell to her knees beside him, not out of weakness, but from the weight of everything she'd carried for too long finally breaking apart. "I came to your door to beg," she whispered, "but you gave me more than food. You gave me dignity." John helped her to her feet. "You gave me purpose again," he replied. That evening, the neighbors gathered again, not for a fight, not for fear, but to celebrate. Mira brought her sweet root tea. Tamar arrived with music from an old Earth speaker. The children danced barefoot in the dirt, and someone started singing a song none of them remembered the words to. But it didn't matter. Under the stars, a small fire glowed at the center of the field. Around it they shared laughter, bread, and the quiet knowledge that something rare had been born in that house. Not charity, not pity, but family. And in the warmth of that flame, Lura whispered to John the words she once thought she'd never say again. "We're home."